Hey guys, so last night I finished undefeated at the Phantom Nightmare Premier event with Branded Despia, and so that said, it was actually legal for that event, so a little bit a week early for that, and so you had some new cards being used like Poplar, Promethean Princess, and what have you. So my deck list in itself hasn't changed all that much since the last time I brought it, but at the same time, throughout my vlogs, I got a lot of comments asking, what my deck list is, so I figured I might as well provide the update, but also use this as an opportunity to talk about Branded Despia in this new format post Phantom Nightmare, and so definitely stay tuned for the vlog as well. I'll have that up shortly within the next few days, but let's just get into the list. So starting off, of course, we have the three Fallen of Albaz, three Aluber, nothing's changed here, one Tragedy, one Quem, again, nothing's changed here, double Cartesia, one Merc, one Shadow Dragon. I've seen some people play two, and then like bigger 60 card lists or 50 plus card lists, like playing three of this. I think that is pretty interesting in the future if like Branded Fusion ever gets like limited or something, or in some kind of consistency hits. This is probably something you can kind of increase. And same thing with Kid, you probably have to play when Branded Fusion gets hit eventually. I do. Like, it's obviously not great because you have to put a card back to the bottom of the deck, but if you saw like my vlogs and like my Branded Despia gameplay footage, like there are a lot of times where I actually had no other choice but to use this to get access to Branded Fusion, and you know what, if you're able to resolve it, it's like really, really worth it. Also good for grind game as well. Maximus, this is going to be interesting. So right now I think, like, it's obviously very strong, especially, like, I'm only really doing this if I get Ash on Branded Fusion. If you resolve Branded Fusion, there's no need to like resolve this as well, realistically, especially when you don't know what your opponent's playing game one. Post Phantom Nightmare, Voiceless Voice, they do also play sometimes Maximus. I'm not sure if they all do, but they do have extra deck cards that can benefit quite a lot. So that is something you're going to have to, I think, rethink if we continue to play this or not. Like, you can still play Nadir Servant, though, even post Phantom Nightmare. You just don't have to play Maximus. And, Nadir Servant is still quite good even without this. Just getting access to, like, Cartesia, Quem, whatever. I still think that, there's no other deck out there other than Branded Despia that pluses as much as we do off of Maximus. So I still think it's quite strong. I think I'm going to have to just kind of test it against one's Voiceless Voice. Like, this set is actually legal, and on Dueling Book I can actually test it a little bit more just to have a better sense. One Lebellion, one Serenir. I think the play of Bishios have definitely gone down a little bit, as you would have seen in my YCS Top Cup breakdown, so still not running the Magnet. Dark Magician, I just really like Dragoon still. It's my boss monster. And of course, the gimmick Puppet Nightmare for the lock. I actually lock my opponents a lot going second as well in game one situations. That really does come up where you like break your opponent's board and you don't have much of a follow-up yourself, but at the very least you lock them, you skip their turn, and then it comes back to you, and then you can kind of like keep playing. So it is quite strong. And then 2 Ash, this hasn't really changed much as you can tell. Spells, we have the 3 Branded Fusion, hopefully it stays at 3, please don't hit it. 3 Branded Opening, this is quite strong against something like Fire King strategy right now because they do tend to pop a lot, so this is really nice, and it's something definitely if you're kind of new to Branded Despia, it's very easy to forget this, so those are things that you have to kind of get used to. The Branded Lost, of course, really strong. Branded Red, for like the Guardian Chimera play, which isn't as great against Fire King when they kind of trigger when they pop. Against most of the strategy, it is pretty relevant, and a lot of times you can go into Sanctifier using this instead. I don't like to do that, at least in game 1 situations. I like to save this just to, either save it for a Chimera play or like, let's say, even like Mirror Jade, I don't know. It really depends on what the opponent's playing. This card I am playing, again, most Branded Despia lists I find don't play High Spirits. I really like this card. I think, especially when you get Ash on Branded Fusion, or you have a hand that's very susceptible to Ash, I'd rather like go into this off Aluber instead and just make some like Cartesia plays and just other kind of follow-up plays. I think it's really strong. It also gets you a bit of a hand advantage again, just with this other effect. It's kind of like Cartesia in that sense. When there's like a fusion monster that hit the grave, you can add it back, but you can just only use one of those 2 effects in the same turn, unfortunately. But there are times that say I have nothing really good to send off Clem because I kind of have everything, then I just like dump this off to the grave, and then most likely you had a fusion that hit the grave, so this just adds back. Gives you some hand advantage for something like Super Poly for the opponent's turn, or let's say like a Dragoon discard for the negate. The 3 Nadir Servant, again, as I mentioned on the Maximus section, this is something you might have to consider. Maybe, for example, even before, I used to run like 2 to 3 of this, even without Maximus. So you can always still run this post Phantom Nightmare. You just maybe have to decide whether you want to play Maximus or not, because it can get maybe a little risky with like Voiceless Voice, depending on how good they actually end up being. For now, it's really good. We have 3 Fusion Deployment. This is another card we can talk about post Phantom Nightmare, which this card actually, the new Yubel Fusion Monster, which is essentially, you can Super Poly like your opponent's board. with like Yubel plus just effect monsters. The problem with this new fusion monster though is that it says Yubel monster, so it's not actually listing Yubel specifically. There is an older fusion one that does mention Yubel specifically, which that means you can technically summon out fusion deployment in that sense if you have that also in your extra deck and then super poly, but I think that's kind of asking for a lot of different combinations. So, but it is kind of interesting to consider. I think it's really cool as a new deck. Foolish, Gold Sark, Call by. This card's definitely really nice. Ideally, if, a lot of times you're probably sending Tragedy, but there are times where, let's say you have access to everything, you can always dump Gimmick off this instead and save that Granule dump for something else, like from your extra deck instead. And then we have Super Poly. This has been quite strong in this format, obviously against Fire King, Rescue Ace, it does come up. And yeah, it's just incredibly strong, and I'm glad that we can play this probably better than a lot of decks out there. We're still running 2 thrusts. I guess post-Phantom Nightmare, if you kind of decide to cut out a little bit on the Maximus, or rather Nadir Servant, maybe you just max out on thrust instead. The play of this card has also been going down as well, as you would have seen in the top cut breakdowns. So that's kind of interesting, but I think in this deck, the Fusion Duplication is just too strong. We have the 1 Retribution and the Duplication. Hopefully this comes out as a super in the next OTS. This is really good, and I don't like having it as common. And then double Imperm, so Ash, 2 Ash, 2 Imperm, just kind of like a decent spread. I should have talked about Ash as well earlier. That's another card that I think maybe some people might not play as much heading into the next format. Who knows? I think just like with the Ash and getting hit with like a Hita, and they just kind of continue comboing off. Maybe Ash sees a little bit of decline, which is always good for Branded, but obviously Branded Despia is doing quite well right now, at least at regional level, and also Labyrinth is still going to be there that you have to be concerned about. Now, extra deck, nothing's changed. The only thing that's changed are the oversleeves, the Magic Cylinder, Magical Hats. Thank you to Imperium Duelist for sending this. Definitely use my code HAKUNA10 at ImperiumDuelist.com to get 10% off. 1 Granule, the 2 Albion. It's funny with this card, there are some rare times where I sort of make a misplay where I use the fusion effect. Like, there are actually times where it's better not to use it. It's like very weird situations because let's say you want to keep that Albaz engrave and then you have like a Cartesia in hand. That's come up for me before because then the Albaz gets banished. It was more like a grind game situation. So there are times, at least give it a little bit of a thought whether you want to trigger this fusion effect. 99% of the time you will, but there are rare times where you might not want to. And you just want to get this engrave and then continue on. Lobelian, Double Mirror Jade, I think that's really standard. Sanctifier for Gimmick Lock. This one, I really like having this. Usually summoning a Quen, but in the end phase, bringing out Albaz actually puts the pressure on the opponent as well, especially if you don't have like a Mirror Jade anymore. Whatever extra deck monster they may have on the field, or whatever light or dark monster, like it just kind of gets cleared up at the end phase with Albaz, so it's really, really nice. And even deadlier if your opponent happens to forget it. Rinbrum, this also can come up against Fire King as well, because some of their like whatever Beast Warrior. Lulu, this is pretty nice. Usually for Nadir Servant, rare times I do hard make this synchro play. And yeah, the attack boost is kind of nice. Super Poly Target, Garura, Mud Dragon, and the Dragostapelia. Guardian Chimera, of course, Pop and Draw is nice. Pop and Burn comes from Dragoon, which is very, very strong. And finally, onto this we just have the 3rd Ash. We have the 3 Droll, which I think is going to be quite strong even into the next format and has been for a while. Another new addition has been just the double bells. This is good against, something like Fire King, obviously against Labyrinth as well, which I'm not a biggest fan of. Nibiru, this is still, if you saw my recent Latin American Remote Duel YCS Top Cup breakdown, this is still in there in the top 5. The one card, of course, I had shown before is the Idol. This is something Flunder, I've personally felt we didn't have a good match against. I know there's a lot of players out there for Branded Despia that think complete opposite and think they have a good Flunder matchup. I don't know. Like, I was actually talking with Hanko Chow yesterday. He was at the event as well, and he also felt that Flunder has a good matchup into Branded Despia, and he's obviously a very good Flunder player. Tops most regionals with it. So I felt a lot better after he told me that, because I do think it's hard. While I don't like siding cards that's very specific for a matchup, especially a deck that's not tier 1, but because this deck is very reliant on, well, I don't want to say reliant, but this is a pretty integral piece of this game plan right now with Gimmick, but that does nothing against Flunder, and this it's just complete. I've never lost a game against Flunder when I brought this out. Obviously, if you get hit by Shifter, like, you're not going to be able to, but you know what, if you get hit by Shifter, you can't do the Banshee zombie roleplay anyways, and so I like going to this, because going into the whole Granule line, it just, like, you just gain a lot more advantage that way. And there are times where, let's say, like, I don't know, I guess I've had a case where, like, they would tribute set, like, Dimension Shifter over this, continue playing, although there's not much playing after that anyways. So that is one translation error with this card. In the OCG, it actually says you cannot summon or set. In the TCG, it says you can not summon, so you can technically still set, which really sucks. Hopefully they translate that properly next time and stop relying on Google Translate or something. We have double Cosmic Cyclone, pretty decent, nothing too much to say there. Feather Duster Evenly Match has also been coming back in play lately, which it did have a very initial steep decline in play, but it's still pretty strong. I think Kashir's kind of come back as well. I almost want to kind of either increase this or Thrust just to kind of make it worthwhile because I'm only playing one. And the one Dark Lure, this doesn't really come up that much. I think I need to cut this. I'm just a little worried. It is only one spot, so I don't feel as committed to it, but I think for now, I'll just keep it because it's just generic. But yeah, lately, I don't know. It's been kind of, I don't think I've ever really needed to side it in. Okay, guys, so that was it for the deck profile. Hopefully that was useful into, going into the new format. Really excited for this deck. I think it's actually in a pretty good position post Phantom Nightmare. And again, you can definitely go check out my vlog that I'll have up pretty soon with based on this event. It was really fun. Anyways, huge thanks to all of you for watching. Big thanks to my sponsors and also patrons as always. And take care, guys.